Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Hello and welcome to the Monday edition of Alaska Weather. I'm meteorologist Kimberley Hoeppner, and today is October 16th, 2017. You can always check our information out by calling our 1-800 number by going to 1-800-472-0391 or going to weather.gov/Alaska and clicking on the area of your choice. Now let's take a look at the weather headlines for the week. I'm just going to step to the side here so you can see we do have the focus of a winter storm across the northern coast, and that's going to be through Wednesday. And we're looking at snow accumulations along this front to be between 2 to 4 inches across the northern coastal areas down through the Brooks Range. Also, we have a bearing front, which is going to be moving quickly to the southeast on Wednesday. And the last thing to note for the week is that we're going to see a colder air mass that's moving across much of the state through the week. Now let's take a look at those advisories that we have across the northern tier of the state. With this first one, I'm going to mention across the eastern Beaufort Seacoast. That's currently in effect, and this is for some snow and blowing snow conditions with winds blowing out of the west in this location, and that is going between 30 to 50 miles per hour with visibility reductions to 1/2 mile at times. And this is out through Tuesday morning at 6 a.m. There's another one out here from Barrow on towards the northwest coastal areas. With the cold front dropping down, we're going to see some very cold northerly flow, reducing visibilities in snow between 1/2 mile or less at times. And this is going to be starting on Tuesday afternoon and running through Tuesday night. So both areas under the advisory with that storm system coming through. Let's take a focus on the satellite today across the north coast. There's not a lot going on there, but you can see the clouds filtering towards the north coast there. So, and that's going to be our focus as we head in through the next few days. The other focus here is the frontal system that's stretching across the eastern areas of the Aleutians back towards the western Aleutians, centered just near Adak this afternoon. And across the the Gulf locations, fairly quiet in this area. We do have a slight spin with a weak low pressure system with a few showers there moving inland this afternoon, and actually some breaks in the clouds across the western and central areas of the state. So that's giving way to clearer skies and colder temperatures. Also, I should mention across the north coast today, with those gusty winds blowing, we're seeing wind chills near zero. So very chilly conditions up there to the north, and snow accumulations through the next 2 days are going to be between 2 to 4 inches. Now, across the state, we did have some light snow occurring, mainly no accumulations during the interior this afternoon. Here's that low pressure across the Gulf, a 997 millibar low, continuing to weaken, but a few showers just making it inland with some light snow across the northern mountains. Now, across the west coast, fairly dry conditions, a few showers moving in across the Bering, and the low pressure system out to the west is a 978 millibar low. This occluded system is bringing some rain along the boundary and wrapping around the backside towards the western Aleutians. Now, as we head into tonight time frame, we're going to see that low pressure system race quickly to the east and begin to bring some gusty southeasterly flow to the Alaska Peninsula, with some gusts out of the north on the backside of this low pressure, mainly between 30 to 45 miles per hour. Now, across the interior areas with weaker winds and temperature inversions will be setting up and causing some foggy conditions across the western tier of the state. Otherwise, just cold temperatures settling in across the southern tier with some light ongoing shower activity for the southeast. Now, across the northern areas of the state, expect some light snow activity Freezing fog is going to be an issue across the northwest coastal areas and also the eastern Beaufort seacoast. Your winter weather advisories are out there for the snow and the gusty wind conditions, and don't forget those wind chills are going to be down near zero through the overnight hours today and through Tuesday night for the most part. Now across the west coast, the Seward Peninsula, looking at a change of snow to rain showers on the south side. And then as we head into Tuesday, that low pressure system across the Alaska Peninsula is going to be moving across the southern areas of the Gulf, bring rain to Kodiak Island, possibly into the southern tip of the Kenai. And the wraparound precip is going to be making it back towards the Alaska Peninsula. Gusty winds will occur around this low pressure system. Now across the southeast, expect ongoing, just light shower activity at times. Across the southern tier of the state, mostly dry conditions in between two systems, and this low pressure system to the north is going to be very actively bring some northerly flow across the northwest coast and some snow. Across the backside of the system, a high pressure ridge is going to be creeping up from the North Pacific, and mainly just some light rain showers occurring behind it. Now let's take a look at your Wednesday weather. We're going to have a mix of rain and snow across the northern Bering, transitioning to rain showers to the south. There's the ridge across the central Aleutians. And here's the low pressure on Wednesday moving into the southeast. Cold temperatures sagging across the state and moving some light snow activity across the western Alaska range. Here's those temperatures for tonight. Going to drop down to the single digits for most of the northeastern areas of this state. Coldest temperatures to the north, with temperatures rather cold across the northern Gulf in the upper 20s. Temperatures for the southeast moderating in the upper 30s to lower 40s, and the western tier of the state in the upper 20s to lower 30s. The Bering is pretty much going to stay in the upper 30s to lower 40 range. Now as we go into tomorrow afternoon, cold temperatures, once again, very similar conditions for the northern tier of the state, with temperatures climbing only into that 15 to 20 degree range. Now across the western areas and the Bristol Bay down through there, they're going to see temperatures into the 40s, possibly just upper 30s at best. The Bering is going to see temperatures most mild in the mid-40s, as well as the southeast and along many of the Gulf locations. Otherwise, the southern tier of the state is going to be seeing temperatures rather chilly in the 20s and the mid-30s for daytime highs. Now for Wednesday night, colder temperatures yet are going to be creeping towards the northern Gulf, with temperatures only in the 20s and warming up into the mid-30s. For the southeast, and mid-30s to near 40 across much of the Bering. So temperatures on Wednesday is not going to be too warm. You're going to see those cold trends through the state as we head into midweek. So this is going to be the first taste of winter for most locations.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Flying weather on Tuesday morning is going to be presenting a few challenges across the state, with IFR and MVFR conditions widespread across the north coast and along the northwest coastal areas as well. We'll also see a thin area of MVFR conditions across the Alaska Range and north, and also look for flying conditions across much of the Bering to be down in MVFR and IFR conditions across the Alaska Peninsula and the eastern half of the Aleutians. Now across the southeast as well, they'll see some MVFR conditions with IFR conditions across the southern channels, and also there across the northern channels. Heading into that afternoon, same conditions will persist across the eastern Gulf and eastern areas of the state. Now across the northern areas of the state, IFR conditions will become more widespread down towards the Brooks Range, and MVFR conditions will persist across western areas and just across the western interior as well. Now across the Alaska Peninsula, continuing in the IFR, MVFR conditions, with MVFR conditions spread across much of the western areas of the Bering and the Aleutian chain. Now let's take a look at, as we head into Wednesday morning, IFR conditions are going to drop even further south of the Brooks Range, with MVFR widespread. And then across the Bering, MVFR conditions, except for the western areas of the Aleutians. South Central will be mainly VFR, as well as the southwest mainland, with concerns across the southeast, primarily over the southern channels and the eastern areas of the Gulf. Heading into Wednesday afternoon, same conditions will persist across the southeast, with areas across much of the state going down in MVFR and IFR conditions widespread north and west of the Alaska Range. Now across the eastern areas of the Bering, back towards the north, we'll see widespread MVFR conditions, which will also affect the eastern Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula. Now let's take a look at your passes in more depth. We'll see Anaktuvik be in the MVFR range all day, where Atigan will start out VFR and then go down to MVFR late morning. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass will both be VFR conditions, and Rainy Pass will be VFR. Windy Pass will go from MVFR, clearing late day, to VFR, and Isabel Pass will also go MVFR to VFR. Mentasta will be in the MVFR range all day, and Tanita will stay VFR, as well as Portage, VFR conditions for you, and Chilkoot and White Pass will be IFR conditions all day on Tuesday. Now let's take a look at the freezing levels across the state. We're going to see that freezing level along the west coast and then draped along the Gulf waters there back towards the Panhandle. And then the 2,000-foot level will be across the northern Gulf and the central areas of the Bering, with a very slow climb to 4,000 feet south of the Alaska Peninsula. Now let's take a look at the icing concerns for tomorrow. Low pressure will bring icing across the Alaska Peninsula and southern areas of the Bering and also into the eastern Aleutians. Also look for areas below 6,000 feet across the southeast, and then across the northern tier, look for icing troubles below 5,000 feet. Your jet stream on Tuesday will be nearly zonal across the southern areas of the Gulf, extending back to the west, a very high jet max at 160 knots there. And then we'll see low pressure systems around the state, one near the Alaska Peninsula and one off the eastern Beaufort seacoast. Change of direction around these low pressure systems will bring more of a north to westerly flow across the northern tier of the state, with more of a easterly flow across the southern tier of the state, other than the onshore flow across the southeast and the Panhandle. Now on the backside of the low pressure system near the Alaska Peninsula, we'll have some speed maxes there between 40 to 50 knots, and with the strongest speeds just to the south of this low pressure system. Very strong northerly flow across the southern areas of the Bering. And then at your 3,000-foot level, expect some pretty strong winds across the Gulf waters here, 40 to 45 knots out of the east. Very similar pattern here as well, with a northerly flow across the northern tier of the state and that easterly component across the south central areas into the southwest. Strong northerly flow will be on the backside of this system coming off of Kamchatka towards the central Aleutians between 30 to 40 knots. Look for the low to the north not to be as strong at the surface here, but for the turbulence, there could be some to the northeastern Beaufort seacoast, but it looks like the main conditions are going to be across the Alaska Peninsula and the southern areas of the Bering. Below 5,000 feet, and look for mainly a speed shear as these systems remain stacked. Also across the eastern areas of the state, free of any turbulence on this day. Now in just a moment, we'll be back with your marine forecast.
"200 years ago, a vital mission began. Its scope? To survey every nook and cranny of the coasts of the United States. Its purpose? To ensure the safe passage of people and goods by ship. This ongoing endeavor has its roots in the first days of our nation. At the time, shipwrecks plagued the country. Commerce was jeopardized. Lives were tragically lost. President Thomas Jefferson saw a solution. He established the Survey of the Coast, the nation's first scientific agency. The survey was charged with making up-to-date charts that would ensure the safety of seafarers. Today, Jefferson's mission of precision charting continues, carried out daily by the surveyors of NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. It's a mission that touches every one of us. Our economy and way of life are intertwined with the sea. 1 out of every 2 Americans lives near a coast. 95% of overseas trade enters or leaves the U.S. by ship. From the depths of our harbors to the positions of our peaks, to the movements of our tides and currents, this is the story of pushing the edge of technology to guarantee the secure flow of people and commerce. This is the story of America's surveyors. If only we could see through the water as we do through air, we could know what hazards lurk below. Rocks, debris, and unknown perils make navigation of our waterways treacherous.
And slow ahead on the engine.
To avoid a shipwreck, we need accurate nautical charts. But to make an accurate chart takes an exacting combination of efforts. Teams must gather a huge amount of data about tides and currents, latitude and longitude, contours of the coastline, and the shape of the sea floor. The better the data, the more precise the chart. Today's surveyors use cutting-edge technology to take their measurements. But 200 years ago, it all began with a simple lead weight at the end of a line. In 1807, the movement of goods and people depended on the sea. There were no railroads, no interstate highways. Ships were key to our economic survival, and the survival of the ship depended on knowing the hazards of each harbor and the nuances of the coastlines, tides, and currents. In 1807, President Thomas Jefferson recognized the need for a survey that would serve the interests of a fledgling nation. At the time, few charts existed of our coastal waters, and the ones that did were very rough and out of date. Jefferson, a surveyor himself, knew that accurate charts would reduce shipwrecks and provide a foundation for the expansion of commerce. Congress agreed with Jefferson, and on February 10, 1807, passed the act authorizing what was then called the Survey of the Coast. A grand total of $50,000 was allocated for the task. Several scientists vied for the position of starting the survey, but Ferdinand R. Hassler, an accomplished Swiss scientist and mathematician, earned the honor. Those who knew Hassler called him eccentric, highly sensitive, and absent-minded, a man who made bread at home and came to his laboratory with flour on his coat. Hassler was a stickler for details and emphatic about scientific accuracy. He insisted on the finest surveying tools, which at the time were available only in Europe. He set sail for England in 1811, but the War of 1812 intervened and Hassler was detained abroad as an enemy alien. 4 years later, in 1816, Hassler finally returned to the United States and got to work. He began on Fire Island, just outside of New York Harbor. Hassler's first step was to establish what is called a baseline. A baseline is a line between two permanently marked points. As its name implies, the baseline is the starting point for all other parts of the chart. Hassler's baseline method was so exact that he used a microscope and a strand of spider's silk to verify that the iron bars were aligned perfectly. For the baseline, Hassler moved the survey bar 1,800 times over the course of 45 days to measure a total length of exactly 8.73 miles. But setting the baseline was just the first step. Reference stations like lighthouses were established on land. Then the shoreline was mapped. Multiple water level measurements were recorded to establish time and heights of high and low tides. Finally, the sounding party could begin to do their work, running lines, measuring depths, and fixing the launch's positions at regular intervals.
Ready? Mark.
$23.5.
23.5, aye.
Sand.
Sand, aye.
Numbers on the final chart are adjusted to show depths at mean low tide. The work was repetitive, yet utterly thorough. Hassler's diligence was rewarded when one of his surveyors named Dehne found a new deep water channel into New York's port. Hassler spent nearly 20 years completing the chart of New York Harbor, the survey of the coast's first published chart. He died just before its publication in 1845. But his legacy was enormous. Hassler had set the surveying bar at its highest scientific level. As a result, United States nautical charts became some of the best in the world. The mid-1800s were a time of great territorial expansion for the United States. In 1845, Texas joined the Union, to be followed by California in 1848. The new country posed a daunting challenge to the surveyors. Thousands upon thousands of square miles of territory, new international boundaries, and vast new coastlines along the Pacific and the Gulf of Mexico all had to be surveyed.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Now on to your ice edge. Let's take a look across the eastern Beaufort seacoast. You can see that edge is starting to expand, and that's going to be the case as we head through the next few days with a colder air mass moving into the Arctic coast. So we have some grease ice along the edge of the coast here, but that is going to be expanding as well, thickening as we head into the middle to the end of the week. So keep an eye out on that ice edge if you have any concerns in that area, as we are going to see that expand. Now let's take a look at your southeast forecast as we head into your forecast for Tuesday, expecting mainly a south to southwesterly flow across the inner channel. Seas on this day will be between 3 to 4 feet, and the outer waters will be between 7 to 10 feet. Now let's take a look at your Wednesday forecast. Your winds will be increasing with those gales across the inner channels. Look for more of a northerly flow to the north, where you get more of a southeasterly flow in the southern channels. The outer waters will primarily be out of the southeast with gales there to the north, and seas on this day are going to range between 15 to 16 feet across the outer waters and 3 to 9 feet across those inner channels. Across the north and western Gulf waters, expect more of a northeasterly flow across the northern Gulf, with more of a easterly flow as you head further to the southern inlet area. Now we'll see more of a northeasterly flow all across the inlet. The seas on this day will be between 4 to 5 feet across the area. Seas across the Prince William Sound will be around 2 feet. Now on Wednesday, expect change of wind directions for the area. Small craft across the southern tip of the Kenai there at 30 knots, northwesterly flow for the entire area. And seas on this day will be 3 feet across the Prince William Sound and Cook Inlet, and then the Gulf waters will be between 9 to 12 feet. Looking at the Alaska Peninsula, stronger winds out in this direction, gales for most of the area. Bristol Bay, however, a little bit lower there at 30 knots, and the wind directions are going to be out of the east and north direction. Seas will be between 7 to 10 feet across the Bering, and the Pacific side will be between 10 to 17 feet. Now, for your Wednesday, a little bit lighter wind speeds, more of a northwesterly direction for the flow, small crafts with seas 6 to 8 feet across the Bering and between 17 to 16 feet across the Pacific side. Now, looking at your Tuesday forecast for the Aleutians, storm force winds across the area for the eastern and going towards the central Aleutians, all of a northwesterly flow with gales for the north side of the chain at 35 to 40 knots, a little bit lighter wind speeds out towards Shimia, out of the west at 25 knots. Seas on this day will range between 10 to 25 feet with the highest seas across the Pacific side. On Wednesday, expect a lighter wind speed again. For this area will be more of a westerly flow to northwesterly flow, except out towards Shimia, more of a southeasterly flow. Seas on this day will be a little bit lower, between 7 to 14 feet. Now let's take a look at your west coast, primarily a northerly flow across the northern Bering with higher wind speeds out of the northeast towards the west coast and Pribilof Islands. We'll see seas on this day between 5 to 10 feet, and on Wednesday, more of a uniform directional flow between 15 to 25 knots, and we'll see the strongest winds out there in the north and central Bering locations, and seas on this day will be between 3 to 8 feet. The north coast will be a very gusty flow. However, freezing spray is going to be a concern across the entire area as well. So 15 to 20 knots with a directional easterly wind becoming more northerly towards Kotzebue Sound and the Bering Strait. On your Wednesday, expect a stronger wind even still as a front moves through. Freezing spray will stay across the area waters with the winds primarily out of the north to northwest direction from the Chukchi Sea. We'll see a little bit change of wind direction towards the eastern Beaufort seacoast, becoming more easterly. Seas on this day will be around 4 to 6 feet with a little bit higher seas out there towards the strait at 7 feet. Here's the cold front that comes through tonight, and that's going to bring some very gusty flow. So winter weather advisories for the northern coastal areas, ending a little bit later tomorrow night for the northwest coast, and we'll see some light snow showers across much of the state and patchy fog conditions across the southern tier. The next storm system here across the Bering will quickly track across to the Gulf, bring and spreading rain across the Gulf areas and into the southeast by your Thursday. Thanks for staying with us. We'll see you again back here tomorrow.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.